So the next Muslim empire that we want to take a look at is by far the largest, the most powerful, and probably the most influential of all these, and that's the Ottoman Empire. Now, the Ottomans are yet again another group of Turks that migrate from Central Asia, southern Russia. They originally set up shop and over time conquer most of the Anatolian Peninsula. Um, they are one of the first groups to very quickly incorporate gunpowder weapons. They become known worldwide as basically the leading builders of high quality cannon and artillery weapons, which helps to serve their expansion over the next couple of centuries. So um, with these new advanced gunpowder weapons in hand, the Ottomans quickly subdue Anatolia. Their next target is the Byzantine Empire. In 1453, they're able to capture Constantinople and wipe out the Byzantines. They then rename the city Istanbul and make it their capital. And with this, they gain a lot of prestige because they have now kind of conquered the last and final remnants of essentially the Romans. You know, they have brought a major Christian capital under their control. I mean, this is the home of the Eastern Orthodox Church. This is the home of the Patriarch. This is the home of, one of the longest lasting empires in history. So with that win under their belt, the Ottomans are kind of energized and they become a leading force within the Islamic world. They begin conquering deep into Eastern Europe. They also begin to aggressively expand into the traditional Muslim homeland, the Middle East, the Arabian Peninsula, North Africa, Egypt, etc. If you watch the video, the 10-minute history of the Ottomans, it'll give you a better idea of what I'm talking about here. They also war regularly with the Russian Empire as well as Safavid Persia, which we'll talk about in the next section of this. But through their expansion, the Ottomans are able to bring basically all of the holy sites of Islam under their control. They control the city of Jerusalem, they control Mecca, they control Medina. And by doing this, the ruler of the Ottoman Empire, known as the Sultan, is able to now take on the title of Caliph, basically claiming the authority and the lineage of the Prophet Muhammad. And the Ottomans essentially become, or at least see themselves as the protector and the defender of true Islam. They call themselves the sword of Islam, partially because they now control and defend all of the holiest sites within the religion. Now, under the Ottomans, again, when you have a lot of expansion, one of the important things that needs to be done is assimilating conquered peoples into your empire, as we talked about with the Russians, as we talked about with the Qing, as we talked about with the Mughals, we're going to talk about again with the Ottomans. The Ottomans, as opposed to the Russians and the later half of the Mughal Empire, are very tolerant of conquered peoples. Just like under the Caliphate, they are welcomed to convert to Islam. They are enticed to convert to Islam through financial opportunities and things like that. But there is very little forced conversion. Again, a lot of this stems from the fact that they are Turks, and even though they are Muslim, they still carry a lot of the cultural traditions of the Turkish people with them. So cultural assimilation is not pushed extremely hard. Minorities receive tolerance, they receive very high levels of freedom. Again, as long as they do not disturb the political situation, as long as they do not resist the Ottoman government, they are relatively left alone. So this map gives you an idea of what we're talking about. under the Ottomans here, and this really only details the first 2 centuries or so of Ottoman expansion. Basically, the Ottoman Empire lasts well through the end. Well, not well through, but it lasts through the end of World War One. So this is an incredibly large and influential empire for several centuries, even beyond what you see on the map here. So, one of the important things about the Ottoman Empire is they demonstrate basically kind of a reversal of fortune in terms of the relationship between Islam and Christianity. Um, Although Islam was able to pretty easily withstand the Crusades, um, at least the Crusades in the Holy Land, European Christians were able to push them out of Spain and to a certain degree out of North Africa. With the Ottomans, this now represents a reversal in fortune. Islam is now on on the offensive against Christianity, as opposed to simply defending itself from Christianity. So the Ottoman conquest of Eastern Europe is a massive shock to the European system because now millions of Greeks and Slavs and Byzantines and every other type of people are now under Ottoman control, and this is seen as a massive threat to stability in Europe, and it creates a pretty panicked situation in most of Western Europe. And Ottoman control over the Middle East, over Eastern Europe, over North Africa further pushes European states to expand themselves elsewhere so that they can match the wealth, the resources, and the armies of the Ottomans. Also, Ottoman control over but essentially one half of the Mediterranean, also dictates to European states that they are going to have to find a new trade routes to India and China because commerce with the Ottomans is not really in anybody's best interest in Western Europe, unless of course you're the Italians, they'll trade with anybody. But getting back to the absorption of these conquered peoples, like we said, the Ottomans are very, very tolerant. To some aspects, they even absorb the culture of conquered peoples and their enemies. They maintain the jizya, but it was, for the most part, less of a financial burden than a lot of these people were experiencing under their previous empires. The Ottomans were very open in terms of social mobility, Christians, Jews, um, any kind of ethnic or religious minority could move up and down in terms of class. Intermarriage was welcome. Economic opportunities were open to pretty much all. There were no restrictions on what minorities could participate in. Freedom of religion was honored as long as taxes were paid. The Ottoman government openly protected Christian churches and Jewish synagogues. Christian and Jewish holidays are honored, holy sites, and the routes of pilgrimage are open to everyone. They also do not push for Turkish migration into new lands in order to force assimilation the way that the Russians did. Now, one practice that the Ottomans do institute is extremely unique in terms of their use of it, also in terms of it as a labor system, and in terms of its place in history. The Ottomans, you want to make sure to remember, are Turks. They are not the traditional people of power within Islam. That is the Arabs and even to a smaller degree, the Persians. So the Turks are somewhat seen, even within their own empire, as outsiders among the Persian and the Arab population. So, in order to ensure a high level of loyalty to the Ottoman government, the Ottomans institute a system known as the Devshirme. And I'm only going to say that once because I always mispronounce it. If you want to hear it again, just rewind the video. In the Devshirme, there I go, I said it again twice. That's all you're getting. In this system, the Ottoman government would collect, and the word literally means harvesting. They would collect young Christian boys around the ages of 9 to 12 from all parts of their empire, essentially taking them away from their families. And these young Christian boys would then be enslaved to the Ottoman emperor, and they would be castrated. And then they would serve within the Ottoman political structure and forcibly convert them to Islam. And the belief was that by taking them at this age and forcibly converting them to Islam, as well as castrating them so that they would not be focused on lustful desires. The Ottomans believed that they were creating a new kind of social class within society that would be loyal to them and only them, right? Um, many of these young boys are chosen to serve as guards to the Ottoman Sultan. Many of them are spread into the departments of the Ottoman government. And by creating this new social class within the empire and giving them a pretty sizable amount of power, they create essentially what they believe to be a strictly loyal social class, whose power and whose creation is tied directly to them. Because again, the Turks, for the most part, do not trust the local Arab and Persian population. Again, the Turks have always been kind of treated as outsiders within Islam, and they feel like this system will allow them to maintain a high level of loyalty throughout the empire. Now, as this process spreads and becomes more widespread throughout the Ottoman Empire, and as more of these young Christian boys are needed to fulfill the positions with the empire, a section of them are split off to create this elite military force loyal only to the Sultan, known as the Janissaries. And the Janissaries become essentially the special forces of the Ottoman Empire. They are given very elite training. They're equipped with all of the latest gunpowder weaponry. They become essentially the Ottoman vanguard. Um, and over time, the Devshirme social class becomes a very influential group with the empire because they have access to the Sultan. They have control over many departments of the Ottoman government, the legal system, the tax system. They hold high-ranking positions of leadership within the military. They become their own, essentially self-formed upper class within the Ottoman government. And this is really unique in world history because this is unlike any coerced form of labor that we've really ever seen to this point. Generally, slavery up to this point comes from conquered populations, prisoners of war, um, in feudalism, you have kind of a system of coerced labor where people are not necessarily enslaved, but they're contractually or genetically essentially tied to the land and their social class. But up to this point in history, you've never, there really aren't any examples of a system of coerced labor, forced labor like this, where a specific group of society is handpicked. They are essentially bred and they are raised and they are um, created basically from scratch in order to serve this very specific labor purpose. Um, so yeah, the depth is not, is not something we really ever seen before. The fact that it's tied to this very specific section of society, young Christian boys age 9 to 12, that are essentially harvested every year. We're really not going to see anything like that again throughout this class. The probably the nearest thing to it is when we talk about the Atlantic slave trade and how slave status in that labor system is tied directly to race, is probably going to be the closest thing that we see to this system.